Welcome to Science Snippets Fun Facts and Trivia. Today, we bring you: can endangered species be saved? How DNA technology is shaping the future. 1. The crisis facing endangered species. 1. The current state of endangered species. Today, the planet is home to an astonishing diversity of life forms. Yet, this biodiversity is under unprecedented threat. The International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, maintains a red list that categorizes species based on their risk of extinction. The numbers are sobering as of the most recent data. Over 42,000 species are threatened with extinction. This includes 41% of amphibians, 37% of sharks and rays, 26% of mammals, and 14% of birds. These statistics paint a grim picture of a biodiversity crisis unfolding on a global scale. The drivers behind these numbers are complex and interconnected. Habitat destruction stands as the leading cause. With the relentless expansion of agriculture, urban development, and industrial activities, natural habitats are being fragmented or erased entirely. Tropical rainforests, often referred to as the lungs of the earth, are being lost at an alarming rate. In the Amazon alone, deforestation has resulted in the loss of millions of hectares, pushing countless species closer to extinction. Climate change exacerbates this issue further. Rising temperatures, shifting weather patterns, and more frequent natural disasters disrupt ecosystems that many species depend on for survival. For example, coral reefs, which harbor a quarter of all marine species, are dying due to ocean warming and acidification. The Great Barrier Reef, the world's largest coral system, has experienced widespread bleaching events, leaving vast areas devoid of life. Overexploitation is another significant factor. From overfishing to illegal wildlife trade, humans have exploited animals and plants at unsustainable levels. Iconic species like rhinos, elephants, and tigers have been decimated by poaching for their horns, ivory, and pelts, respectively. Meanwhile, unsustainable fishing practices have depleted stocks of species like bluefin tuna, pushing them toward the brink of extinction. Pollution adds another layer of threat. Plastics, chemicals, and toxic waste are contaminating ecosystems across the globe. Microplastics have been found in the stomachs of marine creatures at the deepest ocean. Trenches and pesticides have decimated populations of bees and other pollinators, which are critical for food production. The rise of invasive species is yet another problem. When non-native species are introduced into ecosystems, whether intentionally or accidentally, they can outcompete native species for resources. For instance, the Burmese python, introduced to the Florida Everglades, has caused significant declines in populations of native mammals. Adding to these immediate threats is the phenomenon of extinction cascades. When a keystone species, one that has a disproportionately large effect on its ecosystem, disappears, the effects ripple through the food web, potentially leading to the collapse of entire ecosystems. For example, the loss of wolves in certain North American regions led to overpopulations of deer, which in turn overgrazed vegetation, altering the landscape dramatically. But what does this crisis mean for humans? The implications are far-reaching. Biodiversity underpins the health of ecosystems, which provide critical services such as clean air, water, and fertile soil. It also offers a buffer against climate change and natural disasters. The loss of biodiversity compromises these services, directly impacting human survival. The picture is not entirely bleak, however. Conservation efforts have made a difference. Organizations and governments worldwide are working tirelessly. to protect endangered species and their habitats. Success stories, such as the recovery of the bald eagle in the United States or the giant panda in China, demonstrate that with the right strategies, species on the brink of extinction can rebound. Despite these efforts, the numbers continue to rise. The IUCN Red List grows every year, reflecting the accelerating pace of biodiversity loss. This crisis demands immediate and coordinated action on a global scale. It requires governments, businesses, scientists, and individuals to work together, adopting sustainable practices, protecting habitats, and combating climate change. The challenge is immense, but so is the resilience of life on Earth. If we act now, there is still a chance to reverse the tide and ensure that future generations inherit a planet rich in the diversity that sustains all life. 2. The major causes of extinction. Human impact. When we talk about extinction, many imagine it as a natural process. After all, species have been coming and going for billions of years. However, the extinction crisis we face today is fundamentally different. Unlike the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs or ice ages that reshaped Earth's ecosystems, this wave of extinction has one clear cause: human activity. The most significant driver of extinction is habitat destruction. As human populations expand, natural landscapes are transformed into cities, farmlands, and industrial zones. Forests, wetlands, grasslands, and coral reefs once teeming with life are rapidly disappearing. The Amazon rainforest, for instance, loses an area equivalent to a football field every minute. This is not just a loss of trees, it's the eradication of homes for countless species like jaguars, sloths, and the critically endangered harpy eagle. Climate change, fueled by human emissions of greenhouse gases, is another major culprit. Rising global temperatures are pushing ecosystems to their limits. Arctic ice is melting at unprecedented rates, endangering polar bears and seals. Meanwhile, tropical regions are experiencing extreme weather patterns, from prolonged droughts to intense hurricanes, forcing animals to adapt or perish. Overexploitation also plays a crucial role. Fishing, hunting, and logging are being conducted at unsustainable rates. Take the case of sharks. Millions are killed each year for their fins, a delicacy in certain cultures. This has led to a 71% decline in shark populations over the last 50 years. Similarly, the African elephant population is dwindling due to poaching for ivory. Despite international bans, pollution is yet another devastating factor. Chemicals, plastics, and heavy metals are poisoning ecosystems. Oceans, once pristine, are now filled with over 14 million tons of plastic annually. Sea turtles mistake plastic bags for jellyfish and ingest them, often fatally. Oil spills devastate marine life, and pesticides disrupt food chains, particularly among pollinators like bees, which are crucial for global agriculture. Adding to this complex mix is the introduction of invasive species. Humans have unintentionally and sometimes deliberately transported species to regions where they don't belong. These invaders outcompete native species, disrupt ecosystems, and spread diseases. A striking example is the cane toad in Australia, which has decimated local wildlife since its introduction. Finally, the global trade in wildlife has made extinction a highly profitable business. From exotic pets to traditional medicines, the demand for rare species is relentless. Pangolins, the world's most trafficked mammals, are being driven to extinction, as are countless reptiles, birds, and amphibians sold on black markets. What's perhaps most alarming is how interconnected these causes are. Habitat destruction, for example, doesn't just eliminate physical spaces, it also fragments populations, making it harder for species to breed and maintain genetic diversity. Climate change intensifies the effects of pollution, and invasive species exploit ecosystems already weakened by human activity. The result is a vicious cycle that accelerates the extinction rate. Scientists estimate that the current rate of extinction is 100 to 1,000 times higher than the natural baseline rate. This has led many to declare that we are in the midst of the sixth mass extinction, a period where life on Earth is being wiped out at an unprecedented scale. But why should this matter to humans? Aside from the moral implications of causing such widespread harm, biodiversity is essential for the survival of our species. It provides food, medicine, and ecosystem services like clean water and air. The loss of biodiversity threatens our ability to adapt to changing environmental conditions. Understanding the scale and causes of extinction is the first step in reversing it. By recognizing the profound impact of our actions, we can begin to implement changes that protect and restore the natural world. This is not just about saving other species. It's about securing our own future on this planet. 3. The ripple effects of extinction on ecosystems. Extinction isn't just the loss of individual species. It's a disturbance that sends shockwaves through entire ecosystems. Every organism, no matter how big or small, plays a role in maintaining the balance of its environment. When even one species disappears, it can trigger a cascade of changes, sometimes leading to the collapse of entire ecosystems. To understand these ripple effects, consider the concept of a keystone species. A keystone species is one that has an outsized impact on its environment relative to its population size. Wolves, for instance, are a classic example. In Yellowstone National Park, their near extinction in the early 20th century caused a dramatic increase in the elk population. This overpopulation led to overgrazing, which destroyed vegetation and negatively impacted other species like birds and beavers. When wolves were reintroduced in the 1990s, the balance was gradually restored. This process, known as trophic cascade, illustrates how the loss of a single species can destabilize an entire ecosystem. But keystone species are not the only ones with critical roles. Even organisms that seem insignificant can have profound effects. Pollinators like bees, butterflies, and certain birds are essential for the reproduction of countless plants. Without them, crops fail, wildflowers disappear, and the animals that rely on these plants for food face starvation. Alarmingly, pollinator populations are declining worldwide due to habitat loss, pesticide use, and climate change. Marine ecosystems are equally vulnerable. Coral reefs, often called the rainforests of the sea, are home to approximately 25% of all marine species. When coral reefs die, as they are increasingly doing, due to bleaching events caused by rising ocean temperatures, the effects ripple through the entire oceanic food web. Fish populations plummet, affecting predators like sharks and seabirds, as well as human communities that rely on fishing for their livelihoods. The interconnectedness of life means that even species extinction in isolated ecosystems can have far-reaching effects. Consider island ecosystems, which are often home to unique species found nowhere else on Earth. The extinction of a single bird species that disperses seeds can lead to a decline in plant diversity, altering the habitat for other animals and plants. Over time, this can transform the entire island ecosystem into something unrecognizable. Another major consequence of extinction is the loss of ecosystem services. Ecosystem services are the benefits that humans derive from nature, such as clean air, water filtration, soil fertility, and climate regulation. Forests, for example, play a critical role in absorbing carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas. When forests are destroyed or degraded due to species loss, this carbon is released into the atmosphere, accelerating climate change. Similarly, wetlands provide flood protection by absorbing excess water. When species that contribute to the health of wetlands vanish, these ecosystems can no longer provide the same level of protection, making human settlements more vulnerable to natural disasters. The effects of extinction also extend to genetic diversity. Each species carries a unique set of genes that represent millions of years of evolutionary history. When a species is lost, so is its genetic legacy. This loss reduces the overall resilience of life on Earth, making ecosystems less adaptable to changes like disease outbreaks or shifting climates. From a cultural perspective, the loss of species often means the disappearance of connections to traditions, myths, and knowledge systems that have existed for centuries. Indigenous communities, for example, often have deep relationships with local species that are integral to their way of life. When these species disappear, it's not just an ecological loss, but a cultural one as well. Ultimately, the ripple effects of extinction highlight the fragility of the interconnected web of life. Nature thrives on balance, and every species contributes to that balance in its own way. The loss of even one thread in this intricate tapestry can cause it to unravel, with consequences that are often unpredictable and irreversible. The stakes couldn't be higher. Protecting biodiversity is not just about saving animals and plants. It's about safeguarding the systems that make life on Earth possible, including our own. By understanding the cascading effects of extinction, we can better appreciate the urgency of conservation efforts and the need for collective action. 2. How genetic technology is opening new doors. 1. What is de-extinction? Bringing back lost species. De-extinction. The term itself sounds like something straight out of science fiction, yet it represents one of the most groundbreaking concepts in modern biology. In essence, de-extinction refers to the process of bringing back species that have disappeared from the planet. While this idea once seemed like an impossible dream, advances in genetic technology have brought it closer to reality. The concept of de-extinction gained widespread attention thanks to movies like Jurassic Park, but the real science behind it is far more complex and, unfortunately, doesn't involve dinosaurs, at least not yet. De-extinction relies on cutting-edge techniques, such as cloning, gene editing, and backbreeding. Each method has its own challenges and possibilities, but all aim to achieve the same goal: restoring species that have been lost to extinction. One of the most well-known examples is the attempt to revive the woolly mammoth, a giant herbivore that roamed the frozen tundras of the Earth until around 4,000 years ago. Scientists are working to insert mammoth genes, obtained from preserved remains, into the DNA of Asian elephants, their closest living relatives. By doing so, they hope to create a hybrid that could one day roam the Arctic once more. This project, spearheaded by groups like Colossal Biosciences, represents a significant leap forward in the science of de-extinction. But how does this process actually work? At its core, de-extinction hinges on the ability to retrieve and manipulate DNA. For cloning, scientists need an intact genome from the extinct species, which is then inserted into an egg cell of a closely related species. This cell is then implanted into a surrogate mother to develop into a living organism. The process has already been attempted with the Pyrenean ibex, a species of wild goat that went extinct in 2000. Using preserved genetic material, Scientists successfully cloned an ibex in 2003. Tragically, the clone only survived for a few minutes after birth due to complications, but the experiment marked a milestone in genetic research. Gene editing, particularly with tools like CRISPR-Cas9, offers another pathway to de-extinction. Instead of cloning an entire organism, scientists can target specific genes responsible for unique traits. For example, they might edit the DNA of a close relative to express characteristics of the extinct species. This approach is particularly useful when the extinct species' DNA is incomplete or degraded, as it often is for specimens that have been preserved for thousands of years. Another method, known as backbreeding, involves selectively breeding individuals of a species that share similar traits with their extinct relatives. This method is being used in efforts to recreate the aurochs, a type of wild cattle that went extinct in the 1600s. By breeding modern cattle that exhibit aurochs-like characteristics, researchers hope to produce an animal that closely resembles the extinct species. While this approach doesn't recreate the original species, it can restore some of its ecological functions. However, the idea of de-extinction is not without controversy. Critics argue that it diverts attention and resources away from conserving species that are currently endangered. After all, why spend millions to bring back the woolly mammoth when elephants, its living relatives, are on the brink of extinction? There's also the question of whether we can truly recreate a species. Even if we manage to replicate the DNA, the environmental and social conditions that shaped the original species are long gone. Without their natural habitats and learned behaviors, these resurrected animals may struggle to survive. There are also ethical concerns. Some worry that de-extinction could lead to a mindset where extinction is no longer seen as a permanent loss, potentially reducing the urgency of conservation efforts. Others question the potential consequences of reintroducing species into ecosystems that have since adapted to their absence. Could these reintroduced species disrupt current ecosystems, causing harm rather than healing? Despite these challenges, the potential benefits of de-extinction cannot be ignored. Reviving species could help restore balance to ecosystems that have been disrupted by their loss. For instance, reintroducing mammoth-like creatures to the Arctic tundra could slow the melting of permafrost by trampling snow, which insulates the ground. Similarly, recreating species like the passenger pigeon could help regenerate forests in North America, where their massive flocks once played a crucial role in seed dispersal. De-extinction also holds promise for advancing science and technology. The techniques developed for reviving extinct species could be applied to save critically endangered ones. By freezing and preserving genetic material, scientists could potentially bring back species on the brink of extinction decades or even centuries from now. In the end, de-extinction is more than just a scientific experiment. It's a reflection of humanity's evolving relationship with nature. It forces us to confront difficult questions about responsibility, ethics, and the limits of our capabilities. While the dream of bringing back extinct species is still in its infancy, the progress being made today offers a glimpse of a future where extinction might not always mean forever. 2. The role of CRISPR and genetic editing in saving species. In the world of conservation biology, CRISPR and other genetic editing tools are being hailed as revolutionary. These advanced technologies offer the potential to not only save endangered species, but also to restore ecological balance by addressing genetic vulnerabilities and even combating extinction. But what exactly is CRISPR, and how is it being used to protect the biodiversity of our planet? CRISPR, short for clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats, is a powerful tool that allows scientists to precisely edit the DNA of living organisms. Originally discovered as part of bacteria's immune system, CRISPR works like molecular scissors, cutting DNA at specific locations. This precise targeting allows researchers to add, remove, or alter genetic material with unprecedented accuracy. When applied to conservation, CRISPR opens up a range of possibilities. For species on the brink of extinction, genetic editing could address inbreeding and genetic bottlenecks, two common challenges in small populations. For example, cheetahs, which suffer from a lack of genetic diversity, are particularly vulnerable to disease and infertility. By introducing beneficial genes or removing harmful mutations, CRISPR could help strengthen these populations and improve their chances of survival. One of the most promising applications of genetic editing is in combating diseases that threaten entire species. Amphibians, for instance, are facing catastrophic declines due to chytridiomycosis, a fungal disease that has wiped out populations worldwide. Scientists are exploring the possibility of editing the genes of frogs to make them resistant to this deadly pathogen. Similarly, CRISPR has been proposed as a tool to protect bats from white nose syndrome, a fungal disease responsible for the deaths of millions of bats across North America. CRISPR also holds potential for addressing issues related to invasive species, which are one of the leading causes of extinction. By editing the genes of invasive species, scientists could potentially reduce their populations or modify their behavior. For example, a technique called gene drive has been developed to spread specific genetic traits through populations of invasive pests such as mosquitoes or rats, effectively controlling their numbers. While this application is still in its early stages, it represents a powerful strategy for reducing the ecological damage caused by invasives. Another remarkable use of CRISPR is in de-extinction projects. By reconstructing the genomes of extinct species and introducing them into the DNA of living relatives, scientists can attempt to bring back species like the woolly mammoth or passenger pigeon. While this overlaps with cloning and other techniques, CRISPR's precision makes it a particularly valuable tool in these efforts. However, the use of CRISPR in conservation is not without its challenges and ethical considerations. For one, genetic editing is an expensive and technically demanding process. It requires extensive research and testing to ensure that the edits do not have unintended consequences. For instance, altering one gene could have ripple effects throughout an organism's genome, potentially causing unforeseen health problems or ecological impacts. There is also the question of accessibility. CRISPR and similar technologies are primarily developed and deployed in wealthier nations, which may not prioritize the conservation needs of species in poorer or biodiverse regions. This could create a gap in conservation efforts, leaving some species at a disadvantage, simply because their habitats fall outside of countries with access to advanced genetic tools. Furthermore, altering the genetic makeup of species raises significant ethical questions. Should humans have the right to modify the natural world in such profound ways? Could these technologies be misused, either intentionally or accidentally, leading to unforeseen ecological disasters? And how do we balance the potential benefits of genetic editing with the risks of overstepping ethical boundaries? Despite these challenges, the potential of CRISPR and genetic editing to aid in conservation is undeniable. The technology is already being tested in various pilot projects, offering glimpses of what might be possible. For instance, the American chestnut tree, once a dominant species in eastern North America, was nearly wiped out by a fungal blight in the early 20th century. Researchers are now using CRISPR to introduce a gene that makes the tree resistant to the blight, paving the way for its reintroduction into forests. CRISPR could also be used to combat climate change by creating genetically modified plants that are more efficient at capturing carbon dioxide, or animals that are better adapted to changing environments. These applications show that genetic editing could become an integral part of broader conservation strategies, working alongside habitat protection, rewilding, and other traditional methods. In conclusion, CRISPR and genetic editing offer a powerful set of tools that could transform conservation biology. While there are still many hurdles to overcome, from technical challenges to ethical debates, the potential benefits are immense. These technologies could help us not only save species on the brink of extinction, but also restore ecosystems and build a more resilient planet for future generations. 3. The promise of cloning for conservation. Cloning has long been a subject of fascination and controversy, often depicted as a futuristic technology with profound ethical implications. But beyond its sensationalized portrayal in media, cloning has emerged as a practical tool in the fight to save endangered species. By replicating the genetic material of individuals, cloning offers the potential to bolster dwindling populations, preserve genetic diversity, and even revive species that have already vanished from the planet. At its core, cloning involves creating a genetic copy of an organism. This is typically achieved through a process called somatic cell nuclear transfer (SCNT). In SCNT, the nucleus of a donor cell, which contains the organism's DNA, is inserted into an egg cell that has had its own nucleus removed. The egg is then stimulated to divide and develop into an embryo, which can be implanted into a surrogate mother. This process was famously used in the creation of Dolly the sheep, the first mammal cloned from an adult cell, in 1996. In the realm of conservation, cloning offers several unique advantages. First, it provides a way to increase the number of individuals in critically endangered populations. When natural reproduction is no longer viable due to small population sizes or infertility, cloning can serve as a lifeline. For example, the northern white rhinoceros, of which only 2 individuals remain, cannot reproduce naturally. Scientists are working to clone embryos from preserved cells, with the hope of reintroducing these majestic creatures to the wild. Cloning also plays a crucial role in preserving genetic diversity, which is vital for the long-term survival of any species. When populations shrink, genetic bottlenecks occur, reducing the variability in their gene pool. This makes species more susceptible to diseases, environmental changes, and other threats. By cloning individuals with unique genetic traits, scientists can reintroduce diversity into the population, enhancing its resilience. One notable success story is the cloning of the black-footed ferret, a North American species that was declared extinct in the wild in the 1980s. Thanks to a small group of individuals preserved in captivity and advanced cloning techniques, scientists were able to produce a healthy clone named Elizabeth Ann in 2020. Elizabeth Ann was created using frozen cells from a ferret that lived over 30 years ago, bringing new genetic material into the species' recovery efforts. Cloning also holds promise for de-extinction projects. While this application overlaps with technologies like CRISPR, cloning remains a foundational method for attempting to revive species like the Pyrenean ibex, which was briefly brought back in 2003. Although the clone only survived a few minutes, It marked a milestone in de-extinction science, showcasing the potential for this technology to recreate lost species. However, cloning is far from a perfect solution. The process is technically challenging and often has low success rates. For every successful clone, many attempts may fail due to complications during embryonic development or the health of the surrogate mother. Even when clones survive, they sometimes face health problems, as was the case with some of the early clones like Dolly, who suffered from premature aging and arthritis. There are also significant ethical and ecological concerns. Critics argue that cloning diverts attention and resources away from more sustainable conservation strategies, such as habitat preservation and reducing human impact on ecosystems. Furthermore, cloned animals may lack the learned behaviors of their wild counterparts, which are essential for survival in natural habitats. Without these behaviors, reintroduced clones might struggle to adapt, or even disrupt existing ecosystems. Another challenge lies in the availability of viable genetic material. While cloning relies on preserved cells, not all species have extensive genetic libraries. Many extinct species, particularly those that disappeared before the advent of modern preservation techniques, lack high-quality DNA samples. This limits the feasibility of cloning as a tool for species revival. Despite these hurdles, cloning has proven to be a valuable addition to the conservation toolbox. Its potential to save species on the brink of extinction cannot be ignored, especially when combined with other technologies and strategies. Cloning should not be seen as a standalone solution, but rather as part of an integrated approach to conservation. The future of cloning in conservation looks promising, particularly as technology continues to advance. Improvements in cloning techniques could increase success rates and reduce costs, making it a more accessible option for conservationists worldwide. Additionally, as genetic material preservation becomes more widespread, the range of species that can benefit from cloning will expand. Ultimately, cloning represents both the triumph of human ingenuity and the complexity of our relationship with the natural world. While it is not a perfect solution, it provides a glimmer of hope for species facing extinction. As we refine this technology and address its limitations, cloning may become an essential tool in our efforts to protect the planet's biodiversity and restore balance to ecosystems. 3. On-the-ground efforts and success stories. 1. The progress of the woolly mammoth revival project. Bringing the woolly mammoth back to life sounds like the plot of a science fiction movie, but it is a real and ongoing scientific endeavor. This ambitious project aims not only to revive an extinct species, but also to address pressing ecological issues, particularly in the Arctic. Spearheaded by organizations like Colossal Biosciences, the Woolly Mammoth Revival Project represents a bold intersection of genetic technology, conservation biology, and climate science. The woolly mammoth, an iconic species of the Ice Age, roamed the Earth's northern regions for hundreds of thousands of years. Before disappearing around 4,000 years ago, their extinction was likely caused by a combination of climate change and overhunting by humans. However, preserved remains found in permafrost have provided scientists with well-preserved DNA, offering the building blocks for a potential revival. The process of bringing back the woolly mammoth involves a technique known as genetic editing. Unlike cloning, which requires a fully intact genome, this approach uses CRISPR technology to splice woolly mammoth genes into the DNA of its closest living relative, the Asian elephant. The two species share over 99% of their DNA, making this method both feasible and scientifically sound. The goal is not to create an exact replica of the woolly mammoth, but to produce a hybrid species with mammoth-like traits, such as long, thick fur, smaller ears, and the ability to withstand extreme cold. But why bring back the woolly mammoth in the first place? The answer lies in the ecological role they once played in the Arctic tundra. During their reign, mammoths acted as ecosystem engineers, maintaining grassland ecosystems by trampling down trees, dispersing seeds, and compacting snow. These activities helped sustain the Arctic steppe, a landscape that is more effective than forests at storing carbon and reflecting sunlight, thereby slowing global warming. Today, the Arctic is experiencing rapid environmental changes due to rising temperatures and melting permafrost, which releases vast amounts of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane. Scientists believe that reintroducing mammoth-like hybrids could help mitigate these effects by mimicking the behaviors of their extinct counterparts. These animals could restore the grasslands, stabilize permafrost, and create a more resilient ecosystem. The Woolly Mammoth Revival Project has made significant strides in recent years. In 2021, Colossal Biosciences announced funding and partnerships to advance the project. Scientists have successfully identified key mammoth genes responsible for cold adaptation and are working to integrate these into Asian elephant embryos. While no living hybrid has been born yet, researchers remain optimistic that the first individuals could be introduced within the next decade. However, the project is not without its challenges and criticisms. For one, there are significant technical hurdles to overcome. Editing and growing embryos with mammoth-like traits require state-of-the-art facilities and expertise, and success rates in similar experiments remain low. Additionally, Asian elephants, which would serve as surrogates for these hybrids, are themselves an endangered species, raising ethical concerns about using them in such experiments. Critics also question the ecological and moral implications of de-extinction. Will reintroducing a hybrid species truly benefit the Arctic ecosystem, or could it cause unforeseen disruptions? Furthermore, some argue that resources spent on de-extinction projects might be better allocated to conserving existing endangered species, many of which face immediate threats from habitat loss, poaching, and climate change. Despite these concerns, the Woolly Mammoth Revival Project has captured the imagination of scientists and the public alike. It serves as a symbol of what is possible when cutting-edge technology is applied to conservation. More importantly, it forces us to reconsider the boundaries of what humanity can and should do in the face of environmental crises. Ultimately, the success of this project could pave the way for similar efforts to revive other species and restore ecosystems. While challenges remain, the Woolly Mammoth Revival is a testament to the potential of genetic technology to reshape our relationship with the natural world. Whether it succeeds or fails, it will undoubtedly leave a lasting legacy in the fields of science and conservation. 2. Successful conservation programs for endangered species. Conservation programs worldwide are tackling the extinction crisis with innovative strategies and relentless dedication. While the challenges are immense, these programs have achieved remarkable successes, providing hope for the future of endangered species. From reintroduction efforts to habitat restoration, let's explore some of the most inspiring examples of conservation in action. One of the most iconic success stories is the recovery of the giant panda in China. Once a symbol of endangered species worldwide, giant pandas have made a significant comeback thanks to decades of conservation work. The Chinese government, in partnership with international organizations, established a network of over 60 panda reserves. These protected areas safeguard the bamboo forests that pandas depend on for survival. Additionally, breeding programs in captivity have successfully increased the panda population, and many individuals have been reintroduced into the wild. In 2016, the giant panda's status was downgraded from endangered to vulnerable, marking a milestone in conservation efforts. Another inspiring case is the recovery of the California condor, a massive bird with a wingspan of nearly 10 feet. By the 1980s, only 27 individuals remained in the wild. Due to habitat loss, poaching, and lead poisoning, conservationists made the difficult decision to capture all remaining condors and start a captive breeding program. Through meticulous care and management, the population gradually increased. Today, there are over 500 California condors, with more than half living in the wild. This success underscores the importance of bold interventions and long-term commitment. Marine conservation programs have also made significant strides. For instance, the humpback whale was once on the brink of extinction due to commercial whaling. In the 20th century, international efforts, including a global ban on whaling and the establishment of marine protected areas, allowed populations to recover. Today, humpback whales are a common sight in many oceans, and their numbers continue to grow. This serves as a powerful reminder of how global cooperation can achieve extraordinary results. Habitat restoration has played a crucial role in the conservation of the Arabian oryx, a species of antelope native to the deserts of the Middle East. By the early 1970s, the Arabian oryx was declared extinct in the wild due to overhunting. However, captive breeding programs in zoos worldwide provided a lifeline for the species. In the 1980s, reintroduction efforts began in Oman, Saudi Arabia, and other countries, accompanied by habitat protection and anti-poaching measures. Today, the Arabian oryx is thriving, with a wild population of over 1,000 individuals. Even smaller species have seen remarkable recoveries. The golden lion tamarin, a small monkey native to Brazil's Atlantic forest, was once critically endangered due to deforestation. By the 1970s, fewer than 200 individuals remained in the wild. Conservationists launched a multifaceted effort, including captive breeding, reforestation, and community engagement. These efforts not only increased the tamarin population to over 3,000, but also restored critical habitats for countless other species. In many cases, these successes were made possible by local communities. For example, in Kenya, the community-led conservation model has been instrumental in protecting species like elephants and lions. Programs such as the Northern Rangelands Trust empower local people to manage their lands sustainably, ensuring that both wildlife and communities benefit. This approach has reduced human-wildlife conflict and fostered a sense of shared responsibility for conservation. Despite these achievements, conservation programs often face significant challenges, including funding limitations, political obstacles, and the ongoing impacts of climate change. However, these success stories demonstrate that progress is possible when science, policy, and public support align. These examples also highlight the importance of adaptability and innovation in conservation. While traditional methods like habitat protection remain essential, emerging technologies such as satellite monitoring, genetic tools, and artificial intelligence are enhancing the effectiveness of conservation efforts. For instance, drones are being used to monitor wildlife populations and detect illegal activities like poaching, while data analytics help optimize resource allocation. Ultimately, These successful conservation programs remind us of the resilience of nature and the power of collective action. They show that with the right strategies and unwavering determination, we can reverse the tide of extinction and create a future where both humans and wildlife thrive together. 3. The role of global collaboration in species protection. In the fight against extinction, no single country, organization, or individual can succeed alone. Species conservation is a global challenge that requires cooperation across borders, disciplines, and sectors. From international treaties to grassroots partnerships, collaborative efforts have become the cornerstone of many successful conservation initiatives. One of the most influential examples of global collaboration is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora CITES. Established in 1975, CITES is an international agreement between 184 countries designed to regulate the trade of wildlife and prevent the exploitation of endangered species. Through its stringent controls and bans, CITES has been instrumental in curbing illegal trafficking of species such as elephants, tigers, and sea turtles. For instance, the international ban on ivory trade, enforced by CITES, has significantly reduced elephant poaching in some regions, although challenges persist. Another key initiative is the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services (IPBES), often referred to as the IPCC for biodiversity. This global body provides scientific assessments and recommendations to policymakers by fostering collaboration between scientists, governments, and indigenous communities. IPBES helps align conservation efforts with the latest research and traditional knowledge, ensuring that strategies are both effective and inclusive. Global collaboration has also led to the creation of transboundary protected areas, which span multiple countries and protect shared ecosystems. One notable example is the Kabingo-Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area in southern Africa, which spans 5 countries and is home to some of the continent's most iconic species, including elephants and lions. By coordinating conservation efforts across borders, these areas ensure that wildlife can migrate freely and that habitats remain interconnected. In marine conservation, international agreements have played a pivotal role in protecting the world's oceans. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea (UNCLOS) and subsequent agreements have established frameworks for managing marine biodiversity, combating illegal fishing, and creating marine protected areas. For instance, the Ross Sea Marine Protected Area in Antarctica, established through a global partnership, is one of the largest protected marine areas in the world, safeguarding critical habitats for species like penguins, seals, and whales. Beyond formal treaties, non-governmental organizations (NGOs) have been at the forefront of fostering collaboration. Organizations such as the World Wildlife Fund (WWF), Conservation International, and the Nature Conservancy work across borders to implement conservation projects, raise awareness, and influence policy. Their partnerships with local communities, governments, and private industries have led to tangible successes, such as the restoration of coral reefs in the Coral Triangle and the reforestation of critical habitats in the Amazon. Community-led conservation initiatives have also benefited from global support. In many cases, international funding and expertise have empowered local communities to manage their natural resources sustainably. For example, the Locally Managed Marine Areas (LMMA) network in the Pacific has united traditional knowledge with modern science to protect coral reefs and fisheries. This collaborative model has been so successful that it is now being replicated in other regions around the world. The role of global collaboration extends beyond direct conservation efforts to include capacity building and education. International programs like the Global Environment Facility (GEF) provide funding and technical support to developing countries, helping them implement conservation initiatives and build resilience against climate change. Similarly, academic partnerships and exchange programs allow researchers from diverse backgrounds to share knowledge, conduct joint studies, and develop innovative solutions. Despite these achievements, global collaboration is not without its challenges. Differing priorities, political tensions, and resource disparities can hinder coordinated efforts. Additionally, conservation often competes with economic development, particularly in regions where poverty and environmental degradation are intertwined. Balancing these competing needs requires careful negotiation and sustained commitment from all stakeholders. One emerging solution is the use of technology to enhance collaboration. Tools like satellite monitoring, data sharing platforms, and artificial intelligence are making it easier to track species, detect illegal activities, and coordinate conservation actions. For example, the Smart Spatial Monitoring and Reporting Tool platform allows conservationists to collect and share data on wildlife populations and threats in real time, improving response times and outcomes. Ultimately, the protection of Earth's biodiversity is a shared responsibility that transcends borders. Global collaboration has already shown what can be achieved when nations, organizations, and individuals work together, from reducing wildlife trafficking to protecting entire ecosystems. These efforts demonstrate the power of unity in the face of a common challenge. Moving forward, strengthening these partnerships will be essential to building a future where both people and nature can thrive. 4. Challenges facing these technologies. 1. Ethical dilemmas. Should humans play God? As groundbreaking as modern conservation technologies are, they also raise profound ethical questions. Among the most contentious of these is the idea that humans, through cloning, gene editing, and de-extinction, may be overstepping their bounds. Some critics argue that these efforts amount to playing God, a phrase that encapsulates concerns about the moral, philosophical, and ecological implications of such interventions. At the heart of the debate lies the question of responsibility. Humans have driven countless species to extinction through habitat destruction, pollution, and overexploitation. Does this create a moral obligation to use our technological capabilities to reverse the damage? Supporters of genetic conservation argue that if we have the tools to save or revive species, we have a duty to do so. They see these technologies as an opportunity to correct past mistakes and prevent further loss of biodiversity. On the other hand, detractors caution that interfering with nature on such a profound level could have unintended consequences. Ecosystems are incredibly complex, with countless interdependencies that are not fully understood. Reintroducing extinct species or altering genetic traits might disrupt existing ecosystems in ways we cannot predict. For example, if a revived species competes with or preys upon modern species, it could lead to new ecological imbalances, rather than restoring the original system. Another significant concern is the prioritization of resources. Conservation technologies, such as cloning and gene editing, are incredibly expensive. Critics argue that the funds and expertise devoted to these efforts could be better spent on protecting habitats, combating climate change, and addressing the root causes of extinction. For instance, saving endangered elephants or tigers in their natural habitats may have a more immediate and lasting impact than attempting to resurrect mammoths or dodos. The ethical debate also extends to the welfare of the animals themselves. Cloning and genetic experiments often involve trial and error, resulting in high failure rates and potential suffering for the animals involved. Surrogate mothers, often of closely related species, may face health risks or complications during pregnancies. Moreover, cloned animals can suffer from health problems, as was seen with Dolly the sheep, the first mammal cloned from an adult cell. These issues raise questions about whether the potential benefits of cloning justify the harm caused during the process. Cultural and spiritual perspectives add another layer of complexity. Many indigenous communities view nature as sacred and see extinction as a natural part of life cycle. From this perspective, efforts to reverse extinction may be seen as disrespectful to natural processes. Conversely, some cultures may view these technologies as a way to honor and preserve species that hold cultural significance, such as the American bison or the passenger pigeon. Public perception also plays a critical role in shaping the ethical debate. While some people are excited about the possibilities of genetic technology, others are deeply uncomfortable with the idea of manufactured life. Concerns about hubris, the belief that humans can control and improve upon nature, often dominate these discussions. History is filled with examples of well-intentioned interventions that had disastrous outcomes, such as the introduction of invasive species like cane toads in Australia. Skeptics worry that genetic technologies could similarly lead to unforeseen consequences. The philosophical implications of de-extinction are particularly profound. What does it mean to bring back a species? Even if we succeed in recreating the genetic blueprint of an extinct animal, can we truly call it the same species? Without the behaviors, instincts, and environmental interactions that shaped the original species, these resurrected animals might be little more than genetic approximations. This raises questions about authenticity and the value of such efforts. Despite these concerns, proponents of genetic conservation technologies argue that we cannot afford to let ethical dilemmas paralyze progress. They emphasize the importance of developing rigorous guidelines and oversight to ensure that these technologies are used responsibly. For example, organizations like the International Union for Conservation of Nature (IUCN) have called for ethical frameworks to guide de-extinction projects and other genetic interventions. These frameworks could address issues such as animal welfare, ecological impact, and the equitable distribution of resources. In many ways, the ethical dilemmas surrounding these technologies mirror broader debates about humanity's role in the natural world. Should we strive to control and reshape nature using our technological advancements, or should we focus on preserving the systems that have evolved over millennia? The answer likely lies somewhere in between, requiring a careful balance between innovation and restraint. Ultimately, the question of whether humans should play God is as much about values as it is about science. As we continue to explore the possibilities of genetic technology, society must engage in open and inclusive discussions about the risks, benefits, and moral responsibilities involved. Only by addressing these ethical dilemmas head-on can we ensure that our efforts to save the planet's biodiversity are guided by wisdom as well as ambition. 2. The technical and financial barriers to genetic conservation. While genetic technologies like cloning, CRISPR, and de-extinction hold immense potential for conservation, their implementation faces significant technical and financial hurdles. These challenges highlight the complexities of translating cutting-edge science into practical solutions for preserving biodiversity. One of the primary technical barriers is the sheer complexity of genetic processes. Successfully cloning an animal or editing its genes requires an extraordinary level of precision and expertise. For instance, cloning depends on somatic cell nuclear transfer (SCNT), a delicate procedure with a low success rate. Even after decades of refinement, SCNT often results in failed pregnancies, malformed embryos, or health complications in the resulting animals. Each step, from extracting viable DNA to implanting an embryo in a surrogate mother, must be meticulously executed, with no guarantee of success. Genetic editing, while more precise, is not without its own technical challenges. Tools like CRISPR-Cas9 allow scientists to target specific genes, but the process can produce off-target effects, unintended changes in the DNA that could have harmful consequences. For example, editing a gene to make an animal resistant to disease might inadvertently affect other traits, such as reproduction or behavior. These unintended consequences could undermine the survival of the individual or even disrupt ecosystems if the modified animal is reintroduced into the wild. Another technical challenge is the degradation of DNA over time. For many extinct species, the only available genetic material comes from fossils or preserved specimens that are thousands of years old. These samples are often incomplete or fragmented, making it difficult to reconstruct an accurate genome. While advances in DNA sequencing have made it possible to piece together ancient genetic material, the process is time-consuming and expensive. Moreover, even a fully sequenced genome doesn't guarantee success. Scientists must still determine how to express those genes in a living organism, a process that remains poorly understood for many species. Financial barriers are equally daunting. Developing and deploying genetic technologies for conservation is an incredibly costly endeavor. Building state-of-the-art laboratories, hiring skilled researchers, and conducting extensive experiments require substantial investments. For example, the Woolly Mammoth Revival Project, spearheaded by Colossal Biosciences, has raised millions of dollars, but it is still far from producing a viable hybrid. Similarly, cloning efforts for endangered species, like the northern white rhinoceros, depend on funding from governments, NGOs, and private donors. Unfortunately, conservation budgets are often limited, particularly in biodiversity-rich but economically disadvantaged regions. Many countries struggling with deforestation, poaching, and climate change lack the financial resources to invest in high-tech solutions. This creates a disparity where advanced genetic conservation efforts are concentrated in wealthier nations, potentially leaving some of the most endangered species without access to these innovations. The high costs of genetic technologies also raise questions about their sustainability. Conservationists must decide whether investing in cloning or gene editing is the best use of limited resources. For instance, habitat restoration and anti-poaching initiatives are often more cost-effective and have immediate benefits for endangered species. Critics argue that focusing too heavily on genetic solutions could divert attention and funding away from these proven strategies. Additionally, there are logistical and infrastructure challenges to consider. Even if a species is successfully cloned or genetically modified, ensuring its survival in the wild requires suitable habitats, ongoing monitoring, and protection from threats like poaching or habitat destruction. For example, reintroducing a cloned animal into an area with insufficient food, water, or shelter would likely result in failure. This underscores the need for genetic technologies to be integrated into broader conservation plans, rather than treated as standalone solutions. Collaborative efforts are essential to overcoming these barriers. Public-private partnerships, international cooperation, and cross-disciplinary research can pool resources and expertise, making genetic conservation more feasible. Organizations like the Global Environment Facility (GEF) and the International Union for Conservation of Nature (IUCN) play a critical role in coordinating funding and knowledge sharing, particularly in under-resourced regions. Advances in technology also offer hope for reducing costs and improving success rates. Innovations in DNA synthesis, for example, are making it easier to reconstruct genomes from fragmented samples. Similarly, improvements in gene editing techniques, such as base editing and prime editing, promise greater precision and fewer unintended effects. As these technologies become more accessible, they could expand the range of species that can benefit from genetic conservation. Ultimately, the technical and financial challenges of genetic conservation highlight the need for strategic decision-making. Conservationists, policymakers, and scientists must carefully weigh the costs and benefits of these technologies, ensuring that they complement rather than replace traditional methods. By addressing these barriers head-on, we can unlock the full potential of genetic tools to protect the planet's biodiversity and create a more sustainable future. 3. The potential environmental risks of genetic interventions. As promising as genetic interventions like cloning and gene editing are for conservation, they also come with significant environmental risks. These technologies, while innovative, have the potential to disrupt ecosystems, introduce unforeseen consequences, and even exacerbate the challenges they aim to solve. Understanding and mitigating these risks is critical to ensuring that genetic tools are used responsibly and effectively. One of the most pressing concerns is the potential for ecological imbalances. Ecosystems are intricate networks where every species plays a role, whether as predator, prey, or contributor to ecosystem services, like pollination and seed dispersal. Introducing genetically modified organisms (GMOs) or resurrected species could upset these delicate balances. For example, if a de-extinct species competes with existing species for resources or introduces new behaviors, it might inadvertently drive those species to decline or extinction. This risk is particularly high in ecosystems that have adapted to the absence of the extinct species. A related issue is the risk of invasive traits spreading to unintended populations. Gene-drive technology, which can be used to rapidly spread genetic modifications through a population, has been proposed for controlling invasive species. However, if these modifications were to transfer to non-target species, it could have catastrophic effects. For instance, a gene designed to reduce the fertility of an invasive rodent might spread to native rodent populations, threatening their survival and altering the ecosystem in unpredictable ways. Another concern is the potential for genetic pollution, where modified genes escape into wild populations. This could occur if cloned or genetically edited individuals interbreed with wild relatives. While this might seem beneficial in terms of increasing genetic diversity, it could also dilute important traits or introduce vulnerabilities. For example, if disease-resistant genes were spread to a population without proper oversight, it might inadvertently reduce genetic variation, making the population more susceptible to other threats. The reintroduction of species raises further environmental concerns. Cloned or genetically modified animals often lack the behavioral adaptations needed to survive in the wild. For instance, a resurrected species might not know how to avoid predators, find food, or interact with other species in its ecosystem. This could result in high mortality rates and limit the success of reintroduction efforts. Additionally, if these animals survive but behave differently from their extinct ancestors, They might alter the dynamics of their environment in ways that are difficult to predict. There are also concerns about the broader impact of focusing on genetic solutions. By emphasizing the potential of genetic technologies, conservation efforts risk diverting attention from the root causes of biodiversity loss, such as habitat destruction, climate change, and overexploitation. If genetic interventions are seen as a quick fix, there may be less urgency to address these larger systemic issues. This could lead to a scenario where ecosystems continue to degrade, even as individual species are brought back or preserved through genetic tools. Another potential environmental risk lies in the scalability of these technologies. While cloning or editing a few individuals might be feasible, scaling up these efforts to impact entire populations or ecosystems presents significant challenges. For example, releasing a small number of cloned individuals into a wild population may not be sufficient to create a sustainable impact. Moreover, if these individuals fail to integrate successfully, it could result in wasted resources and further setbacks for conservation goals. The potential environmental risks also extend to the broader biosphere. Introducing genetically modified organisms could have ripple effects that extend beyond their immediate ecosystems. For instance, a genetically edited plant designed to sequester more carbon might outcompete native plants, reducing biodiversity and altering soil chemistry. Similarly, the release of genetically modified fish into the wild could disrupt marine ecosystems, affecting food webs and fishing industries. Mitigating these risks requires rigorous oversight and long-term monitoring. Before any genetic intervention is implemented, scientists must conduct extensive studies to assess its potential environmental impact. This includes modeling how the modified organism might interact with its environment, evaluating the likelihood of unintended consequences, and developing contingency plans for mitigating negative outcomes. International organizations like the IUCN and the Convention on Biological Diversity (CBD) are working to establish guidelines and protocols for the safe use of genetic technologies in conservation. Public engagement is also crucial for addressing environmental risks. By involving local communities, indigenous groups, and other stakeholders in decision-making processes, conservationists can ensure that genetic interventions align with the needs and values of the people most directly affected. This approach not only enhances the legitimacy of conservation efforts, but also helps identify potential risks that might otherwise be overlooked. In conclusion, while genetic technologies offer exciting possibilities for conservation, their potential environmental risks must not be underestimated. Careful planning, robust scientific research, and inclusive decision-making are essential to minimize these risks and maximize the benefits of these groundbreaking tools. Only by addressing these challenges can we ensure that genetic interventions contribute to a sustainable and biodiverse future. 5. Proposals for a sustainable future. 1. The harmony of science and nature conservation. Achieving a sustainable future for the planet's biodiversity requires more than just technological innovation. It demands a delicate balance between science and nature conservation. While genetic tools like cloning, gene editing, and de-extinction represent powerful new frontiers, their success hinges on integrating them with traditional conservation methods. This harmony between cutting-edge science and ecological stewardship is essential for creating long-term solutions to the biodiversity crisis. At its core, conservation is about protecting and restoring ecosystems. Healthy ecosystems provide critical services: clean air, fresh water, fertile soil, and stable climates that sustain all life on Earth, including humans. While scientific advances offer innovative ways to address specific challenges, they cannot replace the foundational work of preserving habitats, combating pollution, and reducing human impact. Instead, these technologies must complement these efforts, acting as tools to enhance rather than overshadow traditional approaches. One way to achieve this harmony is through ecosystem-based conservation strategies. Rather than focusing solely on individual species, these strategies prioritize the protection of entire ecosystems, ensuring that the complex web of interactions between species is preserved. Genetic technologies can play a supporting role in these efforts. For example, cloning and genetic editing can be used to bolster populations of keystone species, those that have a disproportionate impact on their ecosystems, while habitat restoration ensures that these species can thrive. Community involvement is another key component of sustainable conservation. Local communities often have a deep understanding of their environments and a vested interest in protecting them. Combining this traditional knowledge with scientific innovation creates more effective and inclusive conservation strategies. For instance, indigenous groups in the Amazon have partnered with scientists to use satellite technology for monitoring deforestation, blending ancient wisdom with modern tools to protect the rainforest. Education and public awareness also play a crucial role in bridging the gap between science and conservation. Genetic technologies, while fascinating, can be misunderstood or viewed with skepticism. Public outreach efforts that explain how these tools work and why they are necessary can build trust and support for their use. Additionally, fostering a sense of shared responsibility for biodiversity can inspire individuals and communities to take action, from reducing waste to supporting conservation organizations. One promising example of this harmony in action is the use of genetic tools to combat wildlife diseases. In 2020, conservationists began exploring CRISPR technology to address chytridiomycosis, a deadly fungal disease that has decimated amphibian populations worldwide. By integrating this cutting-edge science with habitat protection and breeding programs, researchers aim to create a comprehensive solution to save these vulnerable species. Another success story is the restoration of coral reefs, which are under severe threat from climate change and ocean acidification. Genetic interventions, such as creating heat-resistant coral strains, are being combined with large-scale reef restoration projects to protect marine biodiversity. This dual approach recognizes that while science can provide innovative solutions, these solutions must be implemented within the context of broader conservation efforts. Collaboration between governments, NGOs, and the private sector is also essential for achieving sustainable outcomes. Policies that incentivize conservation, such as payments for ecosystem services or carbon credits, can provide the financial resources needed to integrate genetic tools into larger conservation frameworks. Private companies, particularly those in the biotechnology sector, can contribute by funding research and sharing expertise, while NGOs ensure that these efforts are guided by ethical and ecological considerations. Finally, addressing the root causes of biodiversity loss is critical. Technologies like cloning and gene editing can only do so much if habitats continue to be destroyed or the climate continues to warm. Efforts to reduce deforestation, transition to renewable energy, and promote sustainable agriculture are fundamental to creating a world where biodiversity can flourish. Science can play a role here, too, by developing more efficient farming practices, alternative materials to reduce deforestation, and renewable energy technologies that minimize environmental impact. The harmony of science and nature conservation is not just a practical necessity, it is a philosophical one. It reflects a recognition that humans are not separate from nature, but an integral part of it. By aligning our technological capabilities with the needs of the natural world, we can create solutions that respect and enhance the systems that sustain life. In conclusion, the path to a sustainable future lies in blending the best of science with the wisdom of traditional conservation. This integrated approach ensures that we address both the symptoms and causes of biodiversity loss, creating a resilient and biodiverse planet for generations to come. Through collaboration, education, and innovation, we can achieve the harmony needed to secure the future of life on Earth. 2. What we can do today: education and awareness. Creating a sustainable future for Earth's biodiversity starts with the actions we take today. While genetic technologies and conservation initiatives play critical roles, the foundation for long-term success lies in education and public awareness. By empowering individuals with knowledge and inspiring them to take action, we can create a global movement to protect the planet's natural treasures. Education is one of the most powerful tools for change. When people understand the importance of biodiversity and the threats it faces, they are more likely to support conservation efforts. Schools, universities, and community programs can play a pivotal role in spreading this knowledge. For example, incorporating environmental science into curricula helps young people develop an early appreciation for nature. Programs that engage students in hands-on activities, such as planting trees or monitoring local wildlife, can foster a lifelong connection to conservation. Public awareness campaigns are equally important. Many people are unaware of the extent of biodiversity loss, or how their daily choices impact the environment. Effective campaigns can bridge this gap, providing practical information and motivating behavior change. For instance, initiatives like Plastic-Free July encourage individuals to reduce single-use plastics, highlighting how such actions can prevent pollution and protect marine life. Similarly, documentaries like Our Planet and The Blue Planet have reached millions, raising awareness about the fragility of ecosystems and the urgent need for action. Social media has become a powerful platform for spreading conservation messages. Organizations and activists use platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok to reach diverse audiences, particularly younger generations. Viral challenges, eye-catching infographics, and stories of conservation successes can inspire people to learn more and get involved. For example, the Adopt a Tree campaigns, where individuals sponsor the planting of trees, have gained traction online, turning virtual engagement into tangible environmental impact. Community-led initiatives are another effective way to raise awareness. Local programs that focus on conservation often resonate deeply because they address issues that directly affect the community. For example, a coastal town may launch a campaign to protect nearby coral reefs, while a rural community might focus on preserving pollinators, essential for agriculture. These localized efforts not only raise awareness, but also empower people to take ownership of conservation in their areas. Partnerships between conservation organizations and businesses can also amplify educational efforts. Companies with large platforms can use their reach to promote sustainability. For instance, fashion brands have partnered with conservation groups to raise awareness about the environmental impact of fast fashion, while tech companies have developed apps that educate users about endangered species and encourage sustainable practices. Importantly, education and awareness should also emphasize the interconnectedness of global challenges. Biodiversity loss is closely tied to issues like climate change, deforestation, and pollution. By presenting these challenges as part of a larger picture, educators and campaigners can help people understand that solving one problem often contributes to solving others. For example, reducing carbon emissions not only mitigates climate change but also protects habitats for countless species. Encouraging individuals to take small, actionable steps is key to sustaining engagement. Simple acts like reducing water waste, planting pollinator-friendly gardens, or choosing sustainable products can collectively make a significant impact. Highlighting these actions as part of a broader movement instills a sense of agency and connection, motivating people to do more. Finally, education must also address systemic change. While individual actions are important, meaningful progress requires shifts at the policy and corporate levels. Public awareness campaigns can put pressure on governments and businesses to adopt more sustainable practices. For example, widespread public support for renewable energy has led to significant investments in wind and solar power worldwide. Similarly, campaigns against deforestation have prompted companies to commit to deforestation-free supply chains. In conclusion, education and awareness are the cornerstones of conservation. By equipping people with knowledge and inspiring them to act, we can build a global community committed to protecting biodiversity, whether through schools, social media, or local initiatives. Every effort to spread awareness brings us closer to a sustainable future. The changes we make today, no matter how small, can ripple outward, creating a world where people and nature thrive together. 3. A global strategy to prevent extinction. Preventing extinction on a planetary scale requires a unified global strategy, one that integrates science, policy, and public participation to tackle the root causes of biodiversity loss. While individual efforts and localized initiatives are essential, a comprehensive, coordinated approach is necessary to address the systemic challenges threatening life on Earth. At the heart of this strategy is the need for stronger international agreements. Treaties like the Convention on Biological Diversity (CBD) have laid the groundwork for global cooperation, but more ambitious commitments are required. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, set to replace the CBD's earlier targets, aims to halt biodiversity loss by 2030. This framework includes ambitious goals such as protecting 30% of land and oceans, restoring degraded ecosystems, and reducing the impact of invasive species. Achieving these targets will require every nation to not only commit, but also act decisively. To support these efforts, funding must be significantly scaled up. Currently, conservation efforts are underfunded, with estimates suggesting that closing the global biodiversity financing gap would require an additional $700 billion annually. This can be achieved through innovative mechanisms such as carbon credits, biodiversity offsets, and public-private partnerships. For example, companies that contribute to deforestation could be required to invest in reforestation projects, while wealthy nations could provide financial aid to biodiversity-rich, but economically disadvantaged countries. Technology will also play a critical role in a global extinction prevention strategy. Satellite monitoring and drones can track deforestation and poaching in real time, while artificial intelligence can analyze large datasets to predict and mitigate threats. DNA barcoding is another promising tool, enabling scientists to monitor species populations more effectively and identify illegal wildlife products. By leveraging these technologies, conservationists can respond more quickly and efficiently to emerging challenges. Community engagement is another cornerstone of this strategy. Conservation efforts are most successful When local communities are actively involved, programs that empower indigenous peoples and local communities to manage their natural resources sustainably have shown remarkable results. For example, the Amazon's Yasuni Biosphere Reserve in Ecuador has been protected, in part due to the efforts of indigenous groups advocating against oil extraction and deforestation. Global collaboration also requires addressing systemic inequalities. Many of the world's most biodiverse regions are in the global south, where resources for conservation are often scarce. Ensuring equitable access to funding, training, and technology is essential to building a truly global effort. Organizations like the Global Environment Facility (GEF) and the World Bank can play a pivotal role by channeling resources to where they are needed most. Public awareness and education are vital for sustaining global momentum. Campaigns like Earth Hour and World Wildlife Day have demonstrated the power of collective action, raising awareness and inspiring millions to take part in conservation activities. Social media platforms, documentaries, and virtual reality experiences can further amplify these efforts, connecting people to the natural world and fostering a sense of shared responsibility. Policy changes are also critical. Governments must implement and enforce stronger environmental regulations, such as bans on single-use plastics, incentives for renewable energy, and penalties for illegal wildlife trade. The private sector has a role to play as well, particularly in adopting sustainable practices and reducing their environmental footprint. Companies that prioritize sustainability, from sourcing materials responsibly to investing in conservation projects, can set an example for others to follow. One of the most ambitious proposals for a global extinction prevention strategy is the concept of a global conservation corps. This initiative would involve the creation of an international body dedicated to biodiversity protection, with trained conservationists, scientists, and volunteers deployed to critical regions. Similar to peacekeeping missions, these teams could provide support where it is most needed, from enforcing anti-poaching laws to restoring degraded habitats. Finally, addressing climate change is integral to any strategy aimed at preventing extinction. The effects of rising temperatures, shifting weather patterns, and ocean acidification are accelerating biodiversity loss on every continent. Transitioning to renewable energy, reforestation, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions must be prioritized in tandem with direct conservation efforts. The stakes could not be higher. Biodiversity loss threatens not only the survival of individual species, but also the stability of ecosystems that sustain human life. A global strategy to prevent extinction is not just about saving wildlife. It's about securing a future where people and nature can thrive together. By uniting nations, communities, and individuals under a shared vision, we can build a resilient and biodiverse planet for generations to come. The tools, knowledge, and passion exist. It's time to act decisively and collaboratively to make extinction a thing of the past. If you found this video helpful or interesting, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.